Sonic Frontiers, The Final Horizon, the DLC, the much anticipated ending to what was a pretty bad ending, honestly, in my opinion, for Sonic Frontiers has finally arrived. And a lot of people have a lot to say about it, as with just about every single Sonic the Hedgehog product. The update gave us a brand new story, 3 playable characters, a very huge difficulty spike, and a fitting conclusion to an incredible journey. But like I said before, a ton of controversy surrounding this update, and it was very mixed in terms of reception. Now, I'm going to get into all this, but as always, remember, this is opinionated stuff. Again, we're discussing video games, so at the end of the day, you should not take it too seriously, and opinions cannot be right nor wrong. So let's just get that out of the way to start. So before we get into everything, please subscribe to the channel with all notifications and smash the like button. I'll give you a second to do that. And let's get into the controversial Sonic Frontiers Final Horizon update. So update 3, was it good? Was it bad? And I'm here to say right now, after playing it and beating it on stream, I will tell you right now that I personally love this update. I know it's a little bit of a controversial thing to say, but there are several criticisms of this update, so we're going to address everything and try to see if I can sway you. But at the end of the day, I'm pretty objective when it comes to these things, so I have my own personal opinions, but I also am aware of what the public perception is and what the other side thinks about it, which I do think is valid criticism. You don't like the update, I understand, and I see where you're coming from, although personally, with my flavor of gaming and the way I like to play, I disagree. The most important thing that this update gets right, and the reason why I love it so much, is that the reward at the end of the game, which is why you play it, is absolute peak. Let's just get this out of the way right now. What we saw at the conclusion of this game was the rawest thing I have ever personally witnessed in a Sonic game, and I have been a fan for a very long time, and I always preferred more of those Dark Age type stories, you know, the adventure games, the Sonic Heroes, the Sonic 06, the Shadow the Hedgehog. Like, those were always my favorite Sonic games. My personal favorite being Perfect Dark Gaia as my favorite, like, final boss in a Sonic game. Even one of my favorite games, Sonic Adventure 2, I truly think that the ending of this game is even better than that one, although it's a little bit different. Certain things about the ending of this game I do like better than Frontiers, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But the sheer spectacle and cinematics of this fight and the conclusion to this game is amongst the best the series has ever seen, and that's one thing that I can truly appreciate, and I think everyone else should as well. No matter how difficult you thought the update is, there's no way that this final boss fight was not worth it for you, or at least significantly better than...
What the hell?
The absolute worst boss fight in probably the entire Sonic franchise. I'm not even kidding. Between Supreme, who was super underwhelming, and the stupid shooting arcade game as the final boss in this game, which starts you off like this, by the way, for your first introduction to Super Sonic boss fights. To me, it was so inexcusable and almost borderline disgraceful that that's how they chose to end the game. Clearly, Sonic Team probably ran out of budget or whatever the case may be. Listen, we're all speculating here. We don't actually know what the development cycle was like. Well, it's pretty safe to assume that at the end of the game, they basically scrapped together whatever they could, as it seems like they ran out of time, budget, effort, whatever the case may be by the end of the original Frontiers ending. That was one of the biggest crimes that this game did, was literally botching the ending to the story. To me, before this update, I thought the story of Frontiers was actually pretty mid. It builds up this giant climax for essentially nothing, really. I mean, seriously, it was a cool ending. Like, you know, when I was playing it, I was really hyped up, but like, the impact of the original ending truly was not felt. Except for Sage dying at the end, which is actually absent from this version. I kind of wish we kind of saw something like that. The fact that this update fixed my biggest gripe with Sonic Frontiers alone puts it at a very high score for me. I was already at like an 8 out of 10 for Frontiers. Like, I really enjoyed it, and it's definitely one of my favorite 3D Sonic games. Any possible issue that I may have had with some of the Update 3 gameplay, which honestly wasn't too much, did not matter because I got the ultimate reward, which was fixing the ending of the game. Storytelling matters. Immersion matters. It's all part of the human experience. To alienate people who enjoy that or consider it not important is a huge miscalculation, because the reason why a game like Sonic Adventure 2 is so revered by fans is definitely because of the story. All of that matters when you're putting a complete package together as far as the video game goes, especially for the human experience. I would say I was very pleased with what I got out of this update. That That is not the case for everyone else who played it though. So let's address all the criticisms. The first thing is the playable characters were not as good, or at least did not live up to everyone's expectations. The second criticism is the incredible difficulty spikes between all of the Koco trials, in particular the Master King Koco trial, which I get it, makes sense. Another major criticism was the incredible difficulty that a lot of players say that they ran into, or the platforming trials were too hard. In general, difficulty in of itself was something that a lot of players struggle with, and that was some of the criticisms. So let's talk about all these criticisms. I'll give my rebuttals, and if you guys agree with me or disagree with me, that's okay. You're entitled to do that, but let's talk about everything. So without getting too in-depth and giving you guys a crazy review, because that's not necessarily what the purpose of this video is. While it's a quasi review, it's not a full-blown review, but a lot of people did not like the playable characters, and one of the biggest issues, or one of the biggest highlights of this, of what people didn't like, was playing as Knuckles in particular, myself included. I would 100% say that Knuckles by far was the most disappointing character to play as, because he was actually the one I was looking forward to the most. Here's my initial take on what I think this is. So a lot of people expected Sonic Adventure 2 Knuckles. He controls very well in this game, also in Sonic Adventure 1 as well. So a big problem I think most people had, myself included, was their expectations weren't met. You expected, when you played as Knuckles in this game, to essentially have a copy and paste Knuckles of SA2, but clearly that wasn't the case. Now, Knuckles gliding, I don't know how they fumbled that. I don't know how they got that wrong. They kind of frontiersified the movement of him, because when you play SA2, he has some of the smoothest, buttery controls that you can get. You can turn on a dime, you have full 360 movement, full control, there's no clunkiness. It's very simple and straightforward. In addition to all of the characters' movesets, let's be honest, Sonic controls better in these games, the Adventure 1 and 2 games, than he ever has in the series, and that still hasn't been replicated. Although, I would argue Frontiers, in at least the open zone, has very solid movement and controls. So you boot up the story, and you start playing as Amy, and to your surprise, she actually controls pretty well. She has a very weird tarot card gimmick, and you're a little bit confused about that, but overall, the platforming is extremely solid, and I'm sure you cannot wait to play as Knuckles because you have fond memories of playing as him in SA2. You then start the Knuckles story, and the first thing you notice when you try to glide as him, because you think it's SA2, is this. You notice how janky the glide is, and that little pause that he has really throws you off. Now, this is not the Knuckles from Sonic Adventure 2. This is not the Knuckles that you know. Instead of the buttery smooth 360 fluid controls of Sonic Adventure 3, you find yourself controlling, when you're gliding in midair, something similar to Super Mario 64, with how slow he turns. And quickly, like everyone else, including myself, you are extremely disappointed, because your expectations that you have, or the idea you have about playing this character, has not been met, and that is one of the most valid criticisms of Sonic Frontiers Update 3. I was not a fan of Knuckles, and despite my love for the update and how much I played it already and beaten the game and how I've kind of opened up to it, I will not dismiss anyone's criticism of Knuckles because it is extremely valid. While it feels good to climb as him, you have to keep in mind this is basically what Sonic can do while running, but for the most part, it's pretty fun to climb as him, so it's not all bad. Eventually, you'll stumble onto Knuckles' first Chaos Emerald trial, and this is where you probably will lose your patience with the character, because a lot of people were extremely confused about this part, but once you figure it out, once it clicks, it's not all that bad, and it's actually quite the challenge. Once you unlock the side knuckle, you'll find that it can be quite satisfying to complete, but I understand why people didn't like this, because I didn't like this myself. But this is where it all clicks for Update 3. The problem a lot of people have, in addition to their expectations not being met to playing exactly how it played probably in Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, was the fact that these characters are heavily nerfed. The use of the skill tree will open up the playstyle for you, because there's a lot to know about these characters. Once I unlocked the spin dash with all these characters, or I unlocked the infinite glide with Knuckles, or the attack abilities like the punch, it starts to open up a little bit, and it might take you until you actually beat the update to figure out just how fun these characters can actually be. I think a big problem is due to the fact that the characters start off heavily nerfed, and there's not too much direction on what you're supposed to do or where you're supposed to go. Plus, people's expectations or how they think the characters are supposed to be played, or how they thought the characters would play, is the reason why people kind of write off these characters as mid or jank or whatever, which I'm not going to disagree that there isn't some jankiness. Before they truly master the characters and their movement abilities, which is what I think eventually opens up the game, they're quick to go on Twitter and call the thing mid, call the game unfinished, buggy mess, it's trash, whatever. And I think it's a larger problem with gaming culture in general, especially with the Sonic community. People just want to rush to Twitter to say, it's peak fiction, it's raw, it's this, that, or just give their thoughts on the internet and just rush to get their hot take out so they can participate in a debate about Sonic the Hedgehog and go to war on Twitter. Twitter. It's really like, it's honestly tiresome. Some people just need to get their hot take out as soon as possible without truly enjoying the actual game in front of them and giving it time and making sure to really thoroughly play the entire game, unlock all the skills, truly master the movement before you give your big hot take that will get you a lot of engagement on Twitter. In the same breath though, people are quick to defend things without much thought either. So it's not really an attack on both sides. This is just my opinion on how I think this happened. The characters don't play perfectly, and this once again is definitely highlighted when you start to play as Tails too, because he has that weird lag in between the flight, which again, I don't know why they put that in the game or why it's necessary, but the more I play with these characters, the more intrigued I become. I can't say that playing as these characters is 100% perfect. I vastly prefer how these characters play in Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, especially Tails and Knuckles. Not Amy though. Her gameplay in SA1 is absolutely trash. I'm sorry. I know I'm gonna get some heat for this, but I think you gotta give it a chance. I mean, once you unlock the SA2 mech, it gets really fun to play as Tails and just to be able to explore the map and see how you can cheese certain obstacles and how you can use it to complete objectives, use it as a fun way to traverse and cheese certain obstacles, and also the fan service is just amazing. The more you play as Tails, the better. I mean, he doesn't have the same level of air control as SA2, but he can also adjust how high he flies, and then you use the wrenches as an attack while you're flying in midair. It starts to get pretty fun and opens up. I would say Tails and Amy are actually pretty fun, especially Amy. The last thing I was expecting was her gameplay to be absolutely peak. She controls the best out of all of the characters possibly in the game because they all have Sonic's moveset. She has the most responsive gimmick, like flight thing, I guess you could call it. It controls really well, super smooth. It's just flat out good. So what I'll say is this: do I like the base Tails in Sonic Frontiers better than I do like playing as him in SA1? Absolutely not. But do I like playing as a fully upgraded Tails that has the ability to spin dash and fly across the map? Which, by the way, the spin dash is the absolute best move they ever added to this game. But back to what I was saying, do I like a fully upgraded Tails in Sonic Frontiers better than I'd like Tails in SA1? Well, now it just got a lot closer, and the more I play and the more I find these map objectives that I have to unlock, the more I learn the movement, the more addicted and intrigued I become about playing as the other characters in Sonic Frontiers. Because I love the movement of Frontiers, so once I unlock all those Sonic type abilities, being able to fly around in the SA2 mech and flight challenges designed around Tails' flight ability become that much better. And the same principles apply for every other character, even Knuckles, who is still my least favorite to play as. So now we're going to get into the big meat of the problem that a lot of people have. Is the game too difficult? Do players just have a skill issue? Well, we're going to have to see what's up, because I understand that there are definitely some difficulty spikes as far as the challenges go. The correct answer is there's valid points on both sides, and it just depends on what you're talking about. So we're gonna have to go through everything. But let's talk about the first thing that a lot of people had issue with, which is the platforming towers. I think the platforming for the towers, while yes, it's definitely the most difficult platforming in the game, is not overly difficult. It's something that could definitely be done in your first playthrough of the game. As a matter of fact, the fifth tower, which in my opinion is the hardest one in the game, was something I was able to beat on my second attempt. The only problem I had was the game actually crashed after I made it to the top of the tower. I went absolutely crazy and just had like streamer's luck or something like that. I was able to get through that fifth tower literally without falling maybe more than one time. I don't know how I did it, but I get it. Listen, it's a little bit more difficult than other challenges in the game, especially when you consider how easy the base game can be. So Kishimoto heard your guys' feedback and they cranked up the difficulty to the next level. Now, some people can say it was artificially cranked, but at the end of the day, the difficulty of the game was cranked up. I think the tower platforming challenges, especially tower number 3, which like completely relies on momentum, air launching and stuff like that, which is what the game should be more focused around. Like launching off with your spin dash or your air launches is amongst some of the most fun things you can do in this game. But that was one of the things a lot of people complained about. Oh, the game's too automated. There's too much 2D. There's barely any momentum. You know, air launching, rail launching and stuff like that is some of the most fun stuff to do in the game. Well, guess what? You got your wish. And people asked for this. You literally asked for this on Twitter. I know people dismiss it saying, you asked for it. It's not a good criticism, but it really is. This is something that people asked for. They wanted it to be more challenging. It's really not that bad. I mean, listen, if you're not an expert platformer, I get it. It makes sense. But realistically, it might take you a little bit of time. But I mean, this is the end of the game we're talking about. The final reward is certainly worth all the trouble that you go through to get there. I mean, I hate to sound like a boomer, but at what point was there not supposed to be something that you like work hard to achieve in a video game? I'm old enough to remember where games were supposed to be challenging and there was a reward at the end that was worth all of your trouble. This is a free update that is literally longer than the entirety of Sonic Forces that was developed in less than a year. You have to keep that in mind. And I am more than satisfied with the reward that I was able to get and the experience I was able to experience when I beat this game, because that ending and the Supersonic 2 was absolutely so worth it, and it was amongst the series best. I said this earlier in the video, but that's what it's all about. That is what you work hard for. You should want to challenge yourself and have a reward that's worth it at the end. I believe a problem is a lot of people want the instant gratification of just blazing through the update, not even enjoying it, and just rushing to get their reaction up or their hot takes on Twitter. It's okay to struggle a little bit and have a reward at the end. I mean, is grinding some of these challenges any more tedious than spending probably 200 hours grinding the Chow Garden in SA2 just to get a remix of Green Hill Zone? I believe all the additional extra free content that we got was very fun, and while yes, it's frustrating to not get what you want right away, it was absolutely worth it at the end, and I believe it was definitely way more worth it than grinding 180 emblems in Sonic Adventure 2. You want to talk about tedious or unnecessary. As far as the platforming towers go, I understand they can be a little bit unforgiving when it comes to like failure. You know, if you fall off the tower, that's the end, you know, you have to restart all over again, but there's ways to kind of catch yourself when you fall, and there's no checkpoints. I get it, but at the end of the day, you can complete these towers, even Tower 5, which is supposed to be the most challenging one, in about 3 to 5 minutes. We're not talking about Eggman Land here, which is what a lot of people compare it to. In Eggman Land, it's a level that could be like 45 minutes, and if you don't have any lives and you have to start over from the beginning towards the end, like that, I think is a little bit more unforgiving, especially to beginners. As a matter of fact, you have an option. I know a lot of people don't want to put their pride aside. You can change the game to easy difficulty, which by the way will affect you in the platforming towers. So is the game too difficult? Well, if you're talking about any of the platforming challenges, especially the open zone stuff, I'm gonna have to disagree with you, and I truly do think that is a skill issue. Yeah, obviously it's a little annoying if you fail. Like, who wants to fail in a video game? But the idea that they're like so impossible couldn't be further from the truth, and I believe that at the end of a video game, you know, when you're really working towards this amazing reward at the end, it's okay for it to be a little bit more difficult. Maybe it's a boomer take, I don't know. But the platforming towers are really fun in my opinion. I genuinely think when it comes to the platforming towers, you have to get better at the game, straight up. You have not honed or practiced your skills throughout the game. It's okay if you fail a couple times. Worst comes to worst, throw that joint on easy, because in my opinion, all of the platforming stuff is absolutely fine, especially for like a bonus alternative hard mode ending at the end of the game, especially when people begged for it on Twitter saying the game was too easy. It's not to say though that they're 100% wrong. There's definitely one challenge that sticks out in particular that a lot of people, including myself, struggled with and had an issue with. I can't really excuse this. This guy right here, the Master King Koco, his trials are the talk of the town. I would be lying if I said I didn't struggle with this challenge, but this is where it's like completely okay and acceptable to literally go and turn the game onto easy mode. There's really no reason not to, because you do not get any additional extra reward for completing it on hard mode. And again, it's hard mode. It's supposed to be difficult. As far as doing it on easy though, I mean, you have all the same strategies that you had before to do this, so it's really not that hard, assuming you understand how the parry mechanics work. And look, you have a lot more time to parry when you play on easy. So once you figure that out, once you figure out how to cheese these boss, how cheesable they are, it actually, you know, it's still difficult, but again, this is the final step to get that reward. I mean, listen, I would be lying if I said I loved the Master King trials. I mean, had they not even included this in the game, I would have been okay with that. But listen, at the end of the day, we're going for the Supersonic 2 final boss battle, which is completely worth it in my opinion. People who had issues with this, especially if you're going for that perfect parry, like I gotta say, it's kind of hard. You almost gotta get lucky to do it. But like I said, turn it on easy and it's a-okay, you know? I mean, if you've been playing this game long enough, you would know how to do these boss fights and how to cheese them. Is it perfect design? I mean, listen, I would be lying if I said that, but I could overlook how frustrating this stuff was, and I could definitely agree with all the detractors of this update over this specific aspect, but it does not detract or deter from how awesome the final boss was. You also have an option to receive battle guidance for those of you who do not know how to beat the fight or anything like that. The game will give you tips on how to beat the bosses. You got to unlock more of the map though. The last thing people had issue with was the final boss. Somehow, some way, I don't know how I did this. I literally beat it on my first try, and maybe I got lucky. You know, maybe I'm used to spamming that sidestep, which is how I was able to do it. So maybe I'm a little bit biased and like I don't have as much issues as other people did. On my second playthrough, I actually struggled doing this, but final boss, absolute peak. Again, it fixes the biggest issue I have with the game. If not for nothing, if we got 0 changes and we just got to rework worst final boss, I'm still okay with this because I was already at 8 out of 10 with Frontiers. With the addition of the spin dash, and they fixed the worst part of the game, which was the ending, I'm putting this game at my personal 9 out of 10. I have a lot of fun with this game. The cinematics, the theatrics, everything about this was just so good. Again, you get tips on how to do this. Again, it's the final boss. It should be hard. A big problem with gaming nowadays is everyone has this meta strategy guide ready to go for all the games. It's almost ruining how we perceive games. You don't need to beat the boss in your first try. You don't need to beat the tower in your first try. So what? Get better at the game. Try it again. There are so many more difficult games than Sonic Frontiers. Once you figure out the most basic strategy, which is hit the boss, sidestep, and attack the cable, it's really not a hard boss fight. This idea that we need the instant gratification and we need to beat the game on our first try right away and never run into any struggles or issues or problems or challenges, and that we have all these guides and meta strategies ready to go is probably a larger symptom and problem in games, but really, big deal. Get over it. Get better at the game. Not to say all criticism isn't valid. I think on some fundamental level, though, some of the issues you might have do boil down to that. In my personal opinion, most of what you experience in this game is truly not that difficult. If we're talking about the platforming, it's a matter of trial and error, failing and learning where you went wrong, and getting better with each new attempt, which is basically the core philosophy of Sonic games. 95% of this update is the platforming. The Master King Koco is the last trial at the very end of the game. You know, about 5 minutes of what you'll experience. That 5% is definitely BS. I'm going to hand it to you. But the platforming, 95% of the update, is truly not that bad. Multiple playable characters will take some time to get used to, but the more you play, the more abilities you unlock, the more it clicks for you, the better they get. So I would say a lot of it boils down to players just needing to simply get better at the game, and you can't put all the blame on Sonic Team for this. So that's it. The journey for Sonic Frontiers is finally over. What more is there to say? There's a lot to love about the update. By the way, we didn't even get into like the extra cyberspace levels, which I think are really good. I love how a lot of them got a lot of meat to them. Some of these new cyberspace levels are absolutely massive, and they take advantage of the spin dash momentum and air launching and stuff like that. Like, they're actually really good. They're super challenging. Like, they take a while to beat. Like, all the additional content is actually really good, and like the post game, like trying to complete the map is also fun as well, especially like I said, once you unlock those abilities for the other characters. With all that being said, with all the flaws that there are there, I'm not going to call this a perfect update. Nothing's really perfect. My final grade for this is definitely an 8 out of 10. If not for nothing, for all the great things that they did, they fixed the biggest issue I had with the game, which is why it's easily an 8 out of 10. Had characters like Knuckles been just a little bit better, I'd probably go a little bit higher. The issues that the game has, it's definitely there. I can't help but gush over this finale and the love and passion that Sonic Team has delivered for us, and we know that hopefully the next game will build upon all of this and be a little bit less divisive within the community.